Because what's the point of being on the water if it stinks and you can't go in? And that's an important number for her. Inverse of distance to a marina, sewage treatment plant distance, and here's the one we're going to pick on, the bottom one, is fecal coliform concentration in counts per 100 ml. So find the nearest water, you get a sample of the water, how dirty is the water? And then you can ask questions. You can ask, what would happen to the price of a house if, and it's down here, if you increase the coliform concentration by 100, which turns out to be enough to mean you wouldn't want to go in the water. And so what would you do? You'd multiply this by 100, and that gives you 6, and these are in thousands, and so the price of the house would go down by minus 0.06 times 100, $1,000, or $6,500. Now you have a way of valuing how clean the water is. So you could ask, if they cleaned up Chesapeake Bay, what would that be worth? Well, Chesapeake Bay is a really big thing, and so there's a lot of houses involved. You start multiplying by $6,500 a house, you could come up with some real money, maybe enough real money to pay for the costs of cleaning up the Chesapeake. And then you'd have an economic argument for cleaning up Chesapeake Bay. And that was, of course, Nancy's point. If you did this today, you try to do this with much cleaner experimental design. All right, so how many people do experimental stuff? You've gotten that far in biology or something like that? 0? 1? 1? 2? Well, there must be more. How many do experiments? I think that's the way to learn things. All right, we're getting more sheepish hands up here. Yes, right? If you're in the world of science, that's what you think, is it not? You're not stuck in my squishy world where I can't create a second Chesapeake Bay, clean it up, and see what happens. Property values. You're in a world where you have 2 Petri dishes, and you dump something on one of them, and something happens, right? You can actually create replicas of things. So we can't create replicas, so we look to find ways to get close. So what we might want to do is we might want to look at pairs of communities that looked the same before, and then money was allocated to build a sewage treatment plant, and one of them got the outfall and one didn't. That would be our view of how to do it as a quasi-experimental problem. So we're always looking for cases to evaluate where, to begin with, everyone was the same. But these are people, so they're never going to be really the same. They're not the same like it's the same in a physics experiment. They're as close as you're going to get with people. They look the same. The 2 communities have the same income. They have the same percentage of Asians. They have the same percentage of females, right, et cetera. The 2 communities look the same beforehand. And then something is done to one of them and not the other. Chernobyl explodes, and it gets you a little radiation, but the guy 100 miles on doesn't get got. And your 2 villages that otherwise look the same in the Ukraine. Now, that would be an example. And so something happens, and then one of them, something happens to one and not the other, and then we can see, what did our event cause? Did our event cause the property values to go down more in one than in the other? That's the way we'd like to do it today if we could. Often you can't, but that would be our chosen way to do this sort of stuff. Let's go on to the next one, which is a hedonic, the value of a statistical life. The value of a statistical life is a key number to anything having to do with safety. You're going to build a road. If you think the value of a statistical life is large, then you are going to build a safe road. If you think it's small, then you're going to build a less safe road, because it takes money to make the road safe. So once you choose the value of statistical life, then you have chosen how much money you can put into making your road safe and still pass a cost-benefit test. It's a big deal number. If you were going to do regulation of any sort of toxic or anything like that, then it would also matter. So let's suppose you're interested in mercury coming from coal-fired power plants. Obviously, that's not a good thing if you live where you get the mercury on you. But how much of a bad thing is it? Depends upon how many people die or get sick. And how much is that worth? That depends on what number you choose for value of statistical life. So that number gets embedded in everything in which you say the word safety or harm. And it's literally the willingness to pay to avoid a risk that will result in one more death in the population. And they even have 2 terminology. A mort is a death, because, well, that's what it means in which language? French, Latin, most Romance languages. And because people don't usually get a whole death out of anything, you tend to measure everything in millimorts. So now you're introduced to a whole new world in which people talk about millimorts. Here's an example. I made it up, and I'll tell you some real examples in a second that are very similar, but the made-up one's easier. So I imagine 2 7-Elevens, or any sort of convenience store, and there are 2 different neighborhoods. One of the neighborhoods is safe and one is not. And in a safe neighborhood, your chance that when the guy holds you up, he's going to both hold you up and pull the trigger is only 1 in 10 to the minus 4th. That's, by the way, a huge, absolutely huge number here. 1 in 10 to the minus 4th for an ordinary job would be an amazingly large number. 1 out of 10,000 employees do not die at convenience stores each year through holdups. Probably more like 10 to the minus 6th, right? But we'll go for it. The unsafe neighborhood is 3 times that. 3 times 10 to the minus 4th. Yeah? So the difference is 2 times 10 to the minus 4th. That we got. Now, if we observed that you got paid more to work in the dangerous place, you got paid $1,000 more, and we know how many morts you get, 2 times 10 to the minus 4th, then we quickly know how much your life is worth. It's worth $5 million. Right? Because you got paid $1,000 for 2 in 10,000 chance of getting killed. So the number of deaths per dollar, or dollars per death, sorry, is $5 million. And that's the standard way it's done. Example of an easy way of doing it is seatbelts. So people have endlessly done the seatbelt example. It takes like 20 or 30 seconds to put on a seatbelt, and then you can go and find out how much that changes your probability of death. And then you can multiply the 30 seconds by the wage rate, and that would be the amount of money that it's worth to you to avert a death in an accident. So that gives you a value of statistical life. You can be serious and look at different jobs. So you can break jobs down into major industries, which is what Kick the Scoozy did. And you'd find, well, you can guess. So what's in major industries, like manufacturing, transportation, services, things at that level of aggregation, what's the most dangerous? That big level of aggregation. What would you guess? Working on what? When we get narrow, then it's going to be stuff like mining, oil rigs, forestry, way and above most other things, right? Climbing cell phone towers in the middle of the night while there are ice storms. That kind of stuff really wins. But once you aggregate that up into all of manufacturing, it goes away. The answer is, by the way, transportation. And you're least safe at your age. And then as you work in the industry for a couple of years, you get safer, meaning you have less accidents and less fatalities very rapidly. And then somewhere a little younger than I am, it starts going the other way. So if you're thinking, what's the danger of being a bus driver or a railroad worker or something like that? If you survive the first 2 years and you get out when you're 55, it's not too bad. If you start getting out when you're 65, it's a mistake. You're back to being unsafe. So what's Skip do? He's got all of these different industries, and he's got the number of deaths. Right? And so now he can back engineer how much are people willing to pay for a death, because the different industries pay different amounts of money. And you can project that different amounts of money on injury and death. So that's an example of this, but done for real. And it had the side effect of learning that people are less safe at different times in their life. So basically, what are you doing? You look at wages, and you see how wages increase with risk of death. And again, you try to hold all these other things constant, and that's very hard to do. Wages on one side of your equation, risk of death is an attribute. We're back in a hedonic regression. We could have other things on the right-hand side of our equation, like your age. That could be an attribute that has something to do with your wage. We could have college, no college, all kinds of stuff over there. But the one we're interested in is risk. We price each of the attributes. We price the risk of death. That gives us the value of statistical life. The last market method is averting behavior. So if you're going to get hurt doing something, like you're going to drive and statistically you're going to get hurt, then what do you do to avoid getting hurt? You take averting behavior, putting on your seatbelt, driving a car that actually has an airbag. That's all averting behavior. And then as you get a little older, there's averting behavior called driving the speed limit. Now that's a foreign concept to you, but you'll catch on in about 5 years. All right, 10% over the speed limit, not double the speed limit, right? So start doing all of these things to reduce your risk. So one of the ways I could value something was by looking at what you did to get away from it, to avert it. The example I know is a water supply that was poisoned. This is again from the text. So Perkasie, Pennsylvania, had a water supply contaminated by an old industrial plant, TCE. And so what did they do? So they went out and bought bottled water. It was not a surprise. Or they trucked their water in from somewhere else, or they did whatever. That would get rid of the TCE. And then a bunch of economists went out and found out what the averting behavior cost. That can't be too hard. Hey, where are you getting your water from? Oh, it's bottled water. How much you spend on bottled water this week? I write it down. I do that to a sample of households. I'm done, right? It's not very hard to do. And so that would give me an estimate. And the answer was between $22 and $48 during the time. So it's not the biggest number you've ever seen. But you could figure out what's wrong with that. Is that the value? So you've got to ask yourself this question. If I poisoned your household water and paid for your bottled water, would you be okay with that? Yes or no? Okay, so I paid some of the costs, but not all. So it's a lower bound on the costs. But that may be enough. If cleaning this thing up costs less than $22 times the number of households, then it's clearly right to clean it up. I don't have to go further. So getting a lower bound may be enough in many cases. That's averting behavior. And that's how you would use it to find the value of something you could not otherwise find out. And my final comment on this stuff is in this type of analysis, only the lack of direct use leads to damages. So when I'm thinking about coliform in the bay, Nancy Boxall's example, or PCBs, they are only going to affect those who live nearby or who are users of the resource. So poisoning the Chesapeake ecosystem with runoff from chicken farms, which is what we do, and other such things, and then valuing that using the hedonic regression on houses, transportation cost studies on how often people come to the beach, and all of that only gets at the use values. It does not get at the issue of what would you be willing to pay sitting here in your armchair to have the birds return to Chesapeake Bay. That might be a big number because there's 300 and something million Americans. And if the answer per American is $40 or $50 to restore the Eastern Flyway, then you've got a really big number floating around, the number that might be much bigger than $6,500 a house times the number of houses near the bay. So it leaves out all of the passive use values, or even just active use. I'm a New York birder. I want to see birds, but they should be in the Chesapeake at this time of year, and there's no Chesapeake for them, so I don't get to see the birds. Right? That's still going to fall out because I haven't measured my use. I've just measured the use of the people down there. But mostly you miss all the passive uses. So that's my final comment on those. And that gets us to stated preference. Let's see if I can find stated preference. I had my hands on it a second ago. I should be able to do this without downloading it. Here we are. There we go. Stated preference relies on what you say. I mean, quite literally, you wander around, and I'll show you the steps to do it in a reasonably decent way, and you stick your microphone in front of someone's face. How much would you pay to clean up the Chesapeake?
$1 million.
$1 million. 10 million.
20 million.
20 million. Okay. Is there anything that restrains them from saying whatever they please? No. But watch, I can get a very different answer by just fooling around with this a little bit. So instead of just asking it open-ended, suppose I said the following. I have, there's a program that the United States is going to do to clean up the Chesapeake Bay. We're going to do this and that with farmers, it's half the money that it'll cost is going to come from farmers, and the other half is going to come from citizens like you because there's going to be an extra tax on, I don't know, oatmeal. And it's going to cost you, the average consumer, $50. And now watch what happens. We want to know how you feel about this, and so we're conducting a referendum. Would you vote for the $50 referendum, yes or no?
Yeah.
You were willing to pay $1 million a minute ago, Chad.
Yes.
So he says yes. And what about $75?
Absolutely not. Outrageous.
But you were inconsistent. You were willing to pay me $20 million a minute ago. She can still lie, but it doesn't do her any good, is the point. If she's really willing to pay $100, and she's going to lie and say it's $20,000, if I say 75 yes or no, she can only say yes or no. So she can't distort it infinitely up. So there obviously are ways of controlling this somewhat. But you can lie. And she did twice. So the key thing here is what I can value is passive use and existence value. And this is basically out of John Crutillo's article, which I hope you're now busily reading and you will be busily discussing. I love wolves, but I don't do anything at all for them. I don't contribute to wolf organizations. I don't go to Yellowstone to see them. I just love them sitting alone in my armchair. I am the armchair environmentalist, right? But if I ask the armchair environmentalist, would you be willing to vote for this project that saves wolves and it costs $75, they'll probably say yes. So I get value out of them, all right. And if I ask, how many times did you go to Yellowstone, he'd say 0, right? So travel cost method would value that person's value of wolves at nothing, even though they do like the idea that this ecosystem is being redone. Another buzzword here, which I don't make a lot of, but shows up in the article, so I'll go through it, is the idea of option value. So one reason why I might, sitting in my armchair, say, no, I haven't gone to Yellowstone, and I don't plan to, but I might pay for the right to go to Yellowstone and see wolves. So I have the option. So an option is something that you have the right but not the obligation to do. A theater ticket is an option on going to the theater. Do you have to go to the theater after you bought the theater ticket? No. It's true with a movie ticket. You bought the movie ticket, the new reviews came out, they said it was sucko, you decided to go for a bike ride instead, right? You threw the movie ticket away. It's an option. Going to Yellowstone is an option that you have. You could go to Yellowstone. Take you about 12, 13 hours to get to West Yellowstone from here. If you drive kind of speeds you probably drive at your age, about 14, 15 for me. It was 13 last time. And that's an option that you have. So you might be willing to pay for the right in the future to go see the wolves. That might drive your passive use value. But it's still passive. I still don't see you go to Yellowstone. And yet, you could actually want to keep the wolves because you personally wanted to see them. That would give you an option value. The right to do it, but not the obligation. However, when I asked you how much were you willing to pay, if you gave me an honest answer, there's no way I could tell whether my victim over here is just a wolf lover, he doesn't need to see them, or she's got going to Yellowstone on the brain and got a whole list of great things to see there, and she's going to be off, right? And her reason for answering is option value. I'm not getting to go for a couple of years, but I really want the right to go when there's still great stuff there. I can't tell if I just ask them. So we have option value. All right, let's talk about how you would do a stated preference study close to right. There's a lot of steps to it. The first thing you want to do is you want to create an alternative. We could take the money, right, and save the wolves, or we could take the money and buy up some CO2. So you got to convince them that there's money. And they can do other things with it. Because otherwise, in a stated preference thing, they just lose all grounding. So first is, look, I'm going to talk to you about a project to make navigation in Prince William Sound safer. But before I do, you have to understand that there are other projects that also cost money that will save the environment. Plus, you could always go out and buy a new toaster with this money. It's money we're talking about. You do lots of things with it. So this is step one. You talk about money. Step two, you talk about the project. So you give the subject some context for the project. The Prince William Sound one, which is not the one I have on the board, because I've talked about that to death. But the Prince William Sound one was after the Exxon Valdez accident. Richard Carson and Michael Hahnemann, one of our students from long ago, and the other one of my colleagues for a very long time, signed on with the state of Alaska to find a way to value Prince William Sound so they can make Exxon pay for the natural resource damages. Most of the rest of the economics profession signed on with Exxon and made a lot more money out of it. And we would rather not mention all the famous people that did that. So what did they do? They had a real project in mind. The project was to have each of the tankers escorted by 2 escort boats that had devices called Norwegian booms. What a Norwegian boom is a floating thing. You stick on the water and you kind of like throwing this on the water, but then you can pull it up. So it'll float on the water and it'll come up a couple of feet. The result is if you throw it around an oil slick at the very beginning, you can contain the oil slick within the boom, and then you can pump it up, so you won't get it all over the beaches. And by having 2 escort vessels, you have the ability to stop somebody from just driving a ship off the end of the sound, which is what the guy did. So that was the project, and that was going to cost money. So Richard and Michael would then have, and I think still on Richard's website, you can find the materials for this. They had pictures of what Norwegian booms look like, pictures of Prince William Sound, the background about what dropping oil in a sound does, all of those kind of things. So they took 5 or 10 minutes to explain to them what the project, the background of the project really was. And they tell them about the project. So first you tell them, look, it's Prince William Sound, there are lots of seals, there's lots of wildlife, oil is bad for these things. Once upon a time you had an accident, and so on and so forth. We have a project to stop future accidents. Here's our project. It's the Norwegian booms and the 2 cutters. And by the way, their project that they came up with in consultation with the state, and that was what actually was done afterwards. So the project was actually implemented, not that they invented it, but it turned out to be very real.